Okay, today we'll talk about coatings. I'll tell you in a second why, but it's connected to Simon Kuf Gimel Sefevis Rashov too. And I'm going to talk about a bunch of different types of coatings. Not all of them have to do with that sif. And what it is that for all kinds of reasons, people who make things like pots and pans and food and pills put coatings onto them. Coatings, as a rule, tend to be made of fat or oil or things made of those, and that potentially has Kashrus concerns. Obviously, if you make something out of fat, animal fat we consider that treif. It's usually treif or things made from it. So the question is about all these different kinds of coatings. So I'm going to start with pots and pans, which is the most to do with the din, and that is the way you make a pot or a pan or a disposable pan. Same idea is we do it like this. You make the metal. So let's say you're making a pot. So we take aluminum, we cast the aluminum, we create this aluminum, and then we roll it and roll it and roll it until it's the thickness that we like. We keep on rolling it down to a thinner, to whatever thickness you like for your pot or pan. Then you press or stamp it into the shape. So let's say it's a pot, or a pan, you press it into that shape. You made the thing your thickness, however thick you want it to be. Then you scrape off rough edges, and then you polish it and buff it and things like that. Okay, now every one of those steps that I told you, everything that I just told you, rolling and scraping and buffing and all those things causes heat and friction. That heat and friction is not good for the machinery, and it's not good for the pot or pan that you're trying to make out of it. And mamela, you put on lubricants at all these different stages. Not every single one, but that's why you want your lubricant, because you keep on pushing and rolling and scraping, and every one of those things is bad for the machine or for the pot because of the heat. So you put in a lubricant. Okay, so a lubricant is made of fat or wax or something like that, typically, and very often they're not kosher. So the question is, does that make my pot or my pan treif? Okay, when they made the pot or the pan, they made it with this lubricant on it. They had to make it. Questions that affect the kashrus of my things that I have. Brand new. I'm talking about when it's brand new. Okay. Pre-season cast iron is a little bit of a different question, so we'll do that in a minute. We'll do it after we finish the pots and pans. But for regular pots and pans, that's what the question is. Okay. So the beginning of it, and which is what connects it to our din, is that in our din, the Mechaber says, when you're trying to figure out whether a kli is aino ben yomo, so there's a machlokes about what I'm about to say, but the Mechaber basically paskins that if we only say aino ben yomo for time that's balua in a kli, time that's on the top, when you have food left over on the kli, it doesn't become pogrom when it's aino ben yomo. It's a machlokes, but that's how we paskins that's aino ben yomo. Okay, so our first thing to think about is when we have these coatings, is that balua, is that something that's absorbed into the kli, which would then we have the potentials for aino ben yomo, which we're going to talk about lots of those kind of things. Like, do we think like that, like nice tam lefgam and aino ben yomo, or do we say no, it's something left on? If you left a potato on your pot, it doesn't become pogrom after aino ben yomo. It's not automatic that we say that aino ben yomo is mutter. So and that's an important question for us, because aino ben yomo is a big help for, you'll hear all the reasons why, but a lot of things are built on the fact of us assuming aino ben yomo, and the Mechaber Bitul is telling us that things are only aino ben yomo when they're balua into a kli. So it seems to me, from all people I see who spoke about it, and also from the practical, it seems like we treat this as a balua, not as a ban. So let me give you some examples before we get again all the names I'm going to mention you later are all making this assumption. Nobody's thinking about it as ban. Everyone thinks about it as balua. You hear all the reasons why they think to be mekel. When the Mechaber talks about like this, there's a Gemara. There's a Gemara about being mediach. Okay, how to understand the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that says the word to be mediach. Okay, one of the pshatim is that it means is you have a treif pot that you washed it out. Okay, and when you washed out the treif pot, then you say whatever's left is balua. Okay, that's everything else left is balua. Even though it doesn't mean you scraped it, mamash, like there's everything perfectly clean is clean. That whatever if I buy a new pot, I look at it, that looks as clean as the Beis Yosef being mediach a pot. So to me, it looks like it's clean. Okay, clean, and then whatever's left is considered to be balua. You should also two other things from two angles. One is in Shlomo Kluger says that even though the Mechaber has a machlokes about whether be'en can become balua or not, and we paskin that it cannot become doesn't become any binyamin. He said if it's really, really a little bit, tiny bit, that becomes nice time of kavonoso. He says even though if there's a potato left, doesn't become any binyamin. He says, but if it's a tiny little bit, that also becomes any binyamin. And Dain Weiss says that even though we say be'en doesn't become lefkam after 24 hours, he says, but if you give it enough time, it's going to become lefkam. So when we say it just means that 24-hour cutoff doesn't happen for little bits of be'en that are left on a kli. But give it a few days, it's going to be. And I don't think he gives a number. I'm just using those words. Give it enough time, it's also going to become below again. So when we think about a new pot, I didn't get the pot 5 minutes after he made it. I got it weeks after he made it. So by that, there's also reason to think that it's also, even if we would think that it's a be'en, that it should be considered no sound of God. Now, from a completely different angle, in the American law, in the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, has rules for what you're allowed to use as a lubricant, and when you make these pots, rules, and it's going to be used for food, so they have rules of what you're allowed to put onto it, and they have two different groups of ingredients. There's Group A and Group B. So Group A is for rolling metal. When you roll the metal originally, and the amount you're allowed to leave from behind after so not only do they tell you what you're allowed to use, they tell you how little you're allowed to leave behind on the piece of metal that you can, like a pot that's going to be used for cooking, and you're allowed to leave on 0.015 millimeter, okay, which is about half the thickness. No, I'm sorry.
Clean for whatever you want to.
For what? No, when you're making a piece of metal, you're making a pot, you're allowed to use these kind of things as lubricants in the pot itself, for the pot itself.
That's how thick the layer could be.
How much of you could leave behind, okay? Which is
you want a lubricant in the metal itself for some reason.
But it was before you walked in.
Well, you can't clean it off. The process doesn't clean it off completely.
Right. So the amount, and that's about a fifth the thickness of an onion peel. Okay, that's I looked up. I just trying to see what's a dugma 0.015 millimeters. It's much. It's almost nothing. And
so remember what?
I'm trying to show how.
It's not going to be not be'en because of that. I mean.
Well, be'etza, I think it's not be'en. I think it's not be'en.
You think such a thin layer is not be'en?
Yeah. Correct. When you bought a new pot, you don't look and say, "Oh my gosh, I bought a dirty pot." You look at it; it's clean, right? To you, you say, "There's nothing here."
After your meal.
Right. When you clean your pot, that's why I said Beis Yosef. He said when you make diach a pot. When you make diach a pot, it has
to agree with that. If there's no way you in your normal way of testing it can have any see that it's there. It's not there. It's luckily not there. Fine. But I'm talking about you don't. You feel that it's there. Let's say you do feel something there.
Right, but you don't. Okay, I'm saying, but when you bought a pot, you never bought a pot. You said, "Oh my gosh, it came dirty."
It's probably less than 0.01.
Correct. And I tried just to throw in the other thing. The other part of it, when you stamp it, you could leave a little bit more. You could leave a little bit more. That's when you miss it. You walked in the middle late. When you you take the metal and then you have to make it into the shape. They stamp it or they push it into that shape that it's in. It doesn't grow out of the ground like that. What? Correct. So there it's allowed to be about the thickness of about 2 pieces of paper. Okay. Anyhow. Okay.
But there's one category of pot. Are you going to talk about it separately?
Which is what?
The cast iron?
I said I'm going to do cast iron in a second.
Oh,
I said separate. You missed that part. I said that's going to be next. Cast iron is different than regular pots. Again, the pre-season. We're going to talk that. We'll be doing in a second. Okay. So we want. I'm going to mention the word cast iron now because once we showed Schwartz cast iron pans, which we're going to talk about in a second. Cast iron. We showed it to him. With there's on purpose this be'en left onto it, and he looked and I said the question was, is this considered be'en or balua? And he put his hands on it and he says, I don't feel anything. That's considered balua. He said a funny thing. He says we have this thing that the poskim talk about Blios, and to us it's this mysterious magical stuff, and we think it's inside the metal. He says when we have a be'en that's left on the top but we can't see it. That's what a balua is, left on the top that you can't see. But he said, the idea that there's something left on that you can't see. If you can't see it, then in the din side, if that's considered balua. Well, the fact that technically, but scientifically it's on top instead of inside, that's the same thing. He said that's considered balua. Anyway, okay. So let's.
You said it's ben.
It's what's ben for cast iron?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to cast iron. I did not know they say that, but that's life. Okay, so the let's see reasons why it should be mutter. Again, they potentially put on this made this thing together with animal fat. So the question is, why should it be mutter then? Okay, so a few different reasons. The first is like this. They put these lubricants. They use them when they're making in the factory. By the time I get it, the kli is aino ben yomo. Okay, so you say, okay, that's true. It won't affect my food with Yevid, but you're not allowed to use it. It's aino ben yomo to ben yomo. Okay, so the first thing is, I've heard from many different people the same thing that Ramosha said, that there's no gzeir aino ben yomo to ben yomo when if it's a situation that it's by its nature it's impossible that you would have it ben yomo. Meaning if treif is cooked in my pot now, waiting 24 hours means I have to have waited 24 hours, but I could have cooked after 20 hours. Okay, well tomorrow I could cook after 20 hours. But if the whole nature of the chashash is that in the factory they make it like this, well the factory is always aino ben yomo by the time I get to me. There's no such thing as comes from a factory that I get that it's ben yomo. So since that's not possible, so therefore he says there's no gzeir aino ben yomo to ben yomo. Okay, that's what he said. So, so it's a chiddush. Okay, it's a chiddush. So I have two things to tell you about that chiddush. The first is Moshe Kaufman told me. He says I have a right to it. He says it's I don't want to say exactly the fairest, but it's almost a right to this such an idea, and that is what. And he's like this. He said it's not from the gzeir aino ben yomo to ben yomo, but the gzeir min b'mina at min b'she'ein mina. Okay, if you remember, min b'she'ein mina, midaraisa needs bitul b'shishim. Min b'mina, midaraisa only needs bitul b'roiv. Midarabanan, we have a gzeir min b'mina at min b'she'ein mina, and therefore you need shishim even by min b'mina. Okay, so it's not the same, but it's a similar gzeira. Okay, either it's min b'mina at min b'she'ein mina instead of ben yomo at aino ben yomo at ben yomo. So over there, the Ramah says a case. A guy has a treif spoon, and he stick it into 2 pots of water. So the din is, it has to be bitul b'shishim in. You need bitul b'shishim in both. Okay, because you say, I'm sorry, you have a spoon that you stuck into a treif pot. So we say in the first pot it became treif again, and then you need shishim the second time as well. But the Ramah says, but if you stick it into the same pot twice, then you don't need shishim. You only need shishim once. You don't need double shishim. Okay, that's what the Ramah says. And the Shach says something that the Gra explains is, he says because the gzeira min b'mina or the min b'she'ein, again, if you stick into the same pot twice, it's min b'mina, because the bli that came back in is the exact same bli that was there. It's the same pot twice. He says the gzeira min b'mina or the min b'she'ein doesn't apply when we have a situation where it's built into the situation. It's built into the situation that it's always going to be min b'mina, because it's the same pot. Same pot means it's automatically min b'mina. So there he says is, over there we don't say min b'mina, no gzeira min b'mina at min b'she'ein mina, which is the same idea Moshe is saying, which is we don't say gzeira aino ben yomo at ben yomo for cases like that. Okay, the same similar concept like that. Okay, that's one thing. And second is that I heard from him some time ago, and just this week, Rosh Angel Eckstein told me something. Okay, I take it back. He actually told it to me last week, but I didn't get to see it until this week. And that is he was here. I don't know if you know he was here like last week. Anyhow, so he told me, he said like this. He said, there's a Rajva who says something like that also. The Rajva says like this. There's a Gemara in Psachim about chametz kelim after Pesach. You use a keli for chametz before Pesach, and then you have it till after Pesach. Okay? And the Gemara there talks about it being mutter to use it b'she'ein minai. So there's all kinds of pshatim that. From chametz, we use for chametz before Pesach, and you held it over Pesach, and it's whatever to do. It's not so relevant to us what the question there is. A bunch of shittas and rishonim, what the pshat in that Gemara is. But the Rashba says is one of the questions is that the kli became chametz. It was you had chametz over Pesach. It's going according to Shmuel that you not have chametz over Blios either. Whatever. So the Rashba says is there's no gzeira aino ben yomo ata ben yomo. Because once Pesach is over, it's not possible to have ben yomo chametz. It's not possible. Let's say today, we're in the middle, I don't know, whatever month it is, we're in the middle of Teves. Okay, you can't have ben yomo chametz today because chametz is mutter today. So it's not possible to have ben yomo, and since it's not possible today, after Pesach, to have ben yomo, so there's no gzeira aino ben yomo ata ben yomo. Okay, so that's such an idea that we say we say there's no gzeira aino ben yomo ata ben yomo when it's not possible to have it ben yomo either. Okay, now there it's a little different because there the Isser is over. Like the Isser of Chametz ended. It's Not exactly the same as our case, but it's a similar concept idea. So anyhow, okay.
Yeah, it's mamish impossible.
Right, it's right. As opposed to here, it happens to be a situation. Correct. It's not exactly the same, but the same, so conceptually such a thing. And Ramosha said this. And people who followed that, Rabbi first told me, he says, I would tell people, 100% tell them, but don't worry about it. If it's impossible, so no problem, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, it's built into the situation that the chashash is something that's not possible. But as you can imagine, not everybody would say like this. This is a bechidish to say like this, right? There's Xavier and you're telling me sometimes it doesn't apply. Okay, that's one thing. Okay, that's one possible reason why you should be able to use the kli without kashrus. Okay, the second is, we spoke about the amount of blia that's in there is tiny. Okay, to think about how much blia there is. In fact, Rabelski one time went to a pot factory and he measured exactly how much grease goes onto each pot, and now we could feel confident to know that it's always going to be bottled. The amount of blia the amount of blia that's in there is going to be bottled, which is into the food that I'm making.
So we can't use that number, that 0.015.
No, I didn't say that number. No, I'm not talking about the number.
That's what's left.
Right. I'm just talking about how much is on there altogether. Right. How much is on there? It's always going to be bottled. So therefore, you could say this is a kli that's asui shtamish b'shefa. The amount of blia that's in here is so little. And whenever I use my pot, it'll be bottled. So if it's asui shtamish b'shefa, the mechaber holds, so that's perfectly fine. You don't have to kash that at all. So, the mechaber and the Rambam say like that.
No.
What?
I know that.
Okay, now those who say those are. I'm not.
We do it.
So I'm gonna give me 1 second. So now we spoke over there. The even those the Taz and Shach who argue say when it's lefkam and also shamish b'shefa you could be mekel, and we spoke about there's a shaila whether when we say lefkam you could be mekel means also aino ben yomer. Lefkam and aino ben yomer is not always the same. Aino ben yomer is lefkam, but Ladavka is it the same. You can go listen to the recording from me from last time, from a bunch of times ago. Anyhow, Ramosha said there that we are. The words he wrote was minig moire hero lahatir b'shefa heter dafka lachem eis leis. But if it's meis eis, then he was mekel. It's a shiloh. We spoke about there. That's a shiloh whether after meis leis is the same thing as being lefkam, inherently lefkam. Okay, but here's an example of that. Okay, if you're going to be say that asui shamish b'shefa and ben yomer is going to be mutter, that together are going to be mutter, then that's our case. Okay, because it's asui shamish b'shefa and it's aino ben yomer. It's weeks since they made it, so that would be reason another to be mekel. Okay, now I got to get moving along. Okay, one more tzad l'hakol is Time Weiss says he says you could be mekel because it's in kavonoso levatel. He says the thing that's in there has nothing to do with my cooking. Okay, it's zero. It's not even connected. He brings from a Rivash who talks about a similar shaila, about barrels, a similar kind of a shaila, where it's not even like the thing is here and it's part of the cooking process. It has no shaykhs. It has to do with creating in his case the barrel, in our case the pot. It has to do with creating the pot. So to think that I'm trying that bitless of the chatchila to try to get that thing into my food. To say I'm trying to get this into my food when it's here, it has nothing to do with me at all. It's for the guy who made the pot. For him, it was negated. For me, it has zero value or relevance. Or most people don't even know that there's anything on there. Okay, so therefore he says it's considered in kavonoso levatel. So there's no bitless chatchila. So of course there's no xerin ben yomer because there's no bitless chatchila. It's mutter from that side. Okay, now he does tell you. He says you should know that Rivash that I just mentioned, which comes from, says two reasons to be mekel about his case, and the Ramah brings this Rivash, but he only brings the other reason. He does not bring this reason. He says, but Alpha Bikin, he says, I think it's correct. Okay. Some other things to think about just before I walk out of this part, is the coatings, the lubricants often include kerosene or hexane or other things that are nice tam lefkam. So that's another side that many talk about in Dayan Weiss and in Rabbi Vaid. You talk about that it's lefkam. So you shouldn't worry about this stuff that's being put on because it's nice lefkam. Rabelski, I forgot also he tasted it also once and he said yes it was lefkam. I told you went to a pot factory.
Did they see any trace stuff from this?
Yeah, because it's waxes and oils. Because the stuff that's in there, some of the ingredients are things that are
really?
What do you put as a lubricant? A lubricant means something greasy and oily. So animal fat,
all the synthetic stuff out there,
right? Okay, so but there is treifas used in it. Yes, there is treif.
Like pig fat. Like what are they using?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
I don't remember. I seem to remember Belsky's case. It was sheep fat. I don't know why. That's 6 and a half. No, not lanolin. That's what. What's his name wants to talk to you about? So he had a guy taste it first. And then after the guy tasted it, then he had a cheshbon. Why? Then it was only a shadow to and then he was allowed to taste it and spit it out. No. Once the kfeil tasted it, then it was good enough that he should be allowed to taste it and spit it out. Then he could be saying on that lane, whatever. Yeah, it was he didn't just do it. There was a whole story. Anyhow, another thing is some of the people, some things. Who says this? In Dain Weiss also says this. Some of the things are ain by tam kal. Another reason to make it. And then last is that I didn't tell you is that I told you all the places they use lubrication, but there's also a part of the process of making these metals is something called annealing, which has to do with heating them up very high, that annealing in many cases qualifies as kashering. Now that's not at the very end, but what I'm saying is of all the lubricants that are put on, I told you they put on 5 different places, but not all of those end up being in my pot at the end. A lot of those get kashered before they come to my pot at the end. So then I don't have to think about that. So let's say if 1, 2, and 3 are before the kashering, I don't have to worry about 4 and 5. That doesn't take care of the whole problem, but it minimizes what we have to think about. Okay, well, we're way behind being able to finish this. Okay, I'm going to do at least 2 more things, and then I'm sure you want to about fruits and vegetables. Okay, well I'll do it quickly. Okay, the preseason iron pans. Okay, so the preseason ones are very different. The preseason, before I go on, in cast iron is a type of way of making iron and making a pot out of it. That's called cast iron. The cast iron is going to rust, and it's going to not be, and it won't have non-stick properties to it. So you need to do something to cast iron. You can't just take cast iron and cook with it. I mean, you could 500 years ago, but nowadays no one's going to take cast iron and actually cook right in like that. So there's 2 versions. What a lot of people ask about is something called enameled or ceramic cast iron. So there's a coating put onto it that has no shaykhs what we're talking about today. Okay, nothing to do with that. We're talking about pre-seasoned cast iron, which is those that I mentioned, the enameled ones, they're colorful, they have different pretty colors on this and that as part of the coating. We're talking about pre-seasoned, which is it's black. It looks like a cast iron pot. It looks like cast iron, but they've seasoned it, which it means is they bake into it oil or fat or some kind of an oil into it, which keeps it from rusting, and it makes it non-stick. Okay, it's like a greasy additive to it that makes it be able to be non-stick and to make it not rust. So if you want to say now that was the case where Rabbi Schwartz touched it and he said no, clean. Okay, this is considered a blia. Okay. And so, I mentioned a few studying the huckle beforehand. If you want to follow Rav Moshe that says if it's aino ben yomo and it's impossible to be ben yomo, then in this case you could be make also. Okay, because what they put on in the factory has no shaykhs to me. Okay, and it's completely off. I'll say the other studying the huckle are not going to work as well. We can't say, do I know that it's an kavonoso levatel? No, I want it there. It's important to be there. They bedaf can tell you, don't wash the stuff off. Don't use soap and water to wash it off. So it's there because it's part of the cooking process. Is it?
Oh, and the time of it.
But I want it there. But I don't know if you was time. It's part of my process. So you can argue. You can maybe try to convince me that it's kavonoso levatel. I just want it to be there. I don't want it to. Okay, but it's not as simple. Let me say
the food.
It's not as simple as the case of the reverse where I don't want it had nothing to do with me. It has to do with the guy who made the pot. It has nothing to do with the guys who are using the pot. Is it asui shamish? I have no idea if it's asui shamish b'shefel. We don't know. And it becomes all these stud and hak are not as strong over there. We tell people they should crash it.
It's fried.
It's cooked into it. I don't know how much they put. I don't know what's going on there. It's meant to be a significant amount. In my mind, significant amount. So we tell people they should cash them. Just as in passing, we tell them to cash with hagala. Okay, that's a different shayla. You don't need to do libra on it.
I said, you had to get them sorry. They hold my hand and
okay, fine. So thankfully, we don't have time for you to explain to you the whole problem. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Okay, I'm going to see if I can do this and fruits and vegetables. We'll see if we get to that. Okay, next one is styrofoam cups. Okay, so Styrofoam is a brand name. Styrofoam is really something called polystyrene. That's the technical name. And you use it to make cups and containers and plates and all kinds of. We're going to talk about cups because it's just easiest for us to talk about. But it's all. What I'm going to say is all the same for all those other kinds of things. Okay, how do you make Styrofoam cups? So if you look at the cups here. This is
Oh,
you.
yeah.
You know, you probably, David, you're gonna need your glasses off for this. You're gonna need your glasses off, David. And that is, you see, it's made from a zillion little beads.
Right.
Okay, a zillion little beads. And what are those beads? The beads are actually polystyrene. But when they make the bead, they fill it with something in it, a chemical that's volatile. I mean, a chemical that will expand and become bigger when it gets heated up. So the chemical they use would be butane or pentane, something not a Kashrus issue, nor is the polystyrene.
Between the beads or in the beads?
In the bead, each bead.
Or the bead is made out of it.
It's a bead. It's polystyrene with butane inside of it. Okay, that's why it's a bead. And you take a zillion of these beads and you put them into a form, a shape that's the shape of your cup or whatever you want it to be in, and then you heat it up. And when you heat it up, the thing that's inside the bead, the butane, let's say, expands. Okay, and it causes the polystyrene to expand. It pushes it out. Okay, and what happens is you heat it up, so now that all those zillion beads now get smushed together into the shape, stuck to each other, and they then once you even when you take away the heat, they've already been shaped and stuck into that shape of your cup or whatever you're trying to make out of it, and that's why. And then you have your styrofoam cup. Okay, you have your styrofoam cup.
I have it.
Thank you. Good. So that's what you have. None of those ingredients I told you until now are Kashrus sensitive. None of them. Okay. Everybody would be happy and wonderful. You could eat the cup if you want. Okay. You couldn't. Well, except for about the time. Okay. The shaila is that if in order for the company to get the cup out of the mold, okay, the zillion pieces out of the mold, they add something called zinc stearate. Okay. The biggest company that everybody knows, Dart. Tells you straight out they don't do it anymore, but they had a letter that would say is our zinc stearate comes from animal fat. Okay, they said we tried to use it from vegetable, it comes from animal fat. Talk to your rabbi or your imam to find out whether you're allowed to use it. We don't take responsibility. We're just letting you know. Okay, we're letting you know that it's there. We tried to get vegetable sources, it doesn't work, but it doesn't work as well. So this is what we do. Okay, so what is this zinc stearate? Like, what's going on with it? So it's put in when they put the beads into the mold, they put in, well, when they create the beads to be put into the mold, they sprinkle on zinc stearate onto the top of the beads, and because it'll help get the cup out of the mold when they're finished. Okay, so there's a few reasons to not be concerned about this. Okay, the first is the amount of zinc stearate that's put into it is in the area of 1 to 2 pounds for every 1,000 pounds of polystyrene. Okay, so that means is the amount of zinc.
It's in the mix or it's on the surface?
There's a bucket of a trillion beads, and into that they sprinkle this powder onto it, and then they put those into the thing. Okay, so the amount that's in there is tiny. I mean, the amount that's in there is not. What do you want, David? Okay, is it okay? Okay, so all the things we said before are all going to work for that also. Okay, second is the zinc stearate has a melting point of 266 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, it's my impression. I might be wrong. My impression that when they make the cups, the heating to get the other stuff to expand is at higher than that, at 280 degrees Fahrenheit. This is my impression. I might be wrong. Which means is that the zinc stearate becomes part of the polystyrene. It gets melted into the polystyrene, which would make it nice sound of kavonoso. Okay, think about it. Polystyrene doesn't taste very good. If you bit into this cup, you'd find out it doesn't taste very good. So you don't have to bite in your cup. So it doesn't taste very good. And mamela, that's another reason that's nice sound of kavonoso. Now, before I get to my last thing, the reason why the one of the times a long time ago when the tumult started about people saying you can't eat these cups, the company tells you we put this trafe thing into it, is because someone said is not only do they put this trafe into it, but it actually comes out into your drinks. He says, V'haraya, I made tea in a styrofoam cup, and I saw the oil floating on top of it. Okay, so that's what the guy said. So Rabelsky says, no, what you saw, you didn't see any zinc stearate on top of your cup. He says, what you saw was the oil coming out of your tea. He says, and if you'd make tea in a non-styrofoam cup, you'd see the same thing, which is what I did. So you can see it here yourself. This is two of the same type of tea bags. So you see something floating on the top there, some kind of whatever floating on the top there, And the same thing is floating on top of the non-styrofoam cup.
There's oil in a lot of botanicals, man.
Right. So the tea has oil in it. The tea has oil in it.
Also coffee.
He said coffee had oil. So I didn't try it with coffee. He says tea and what? Okay. He says it has an oil inside of it. He says so you can see the same thing in both. So the fact that you see something floating is not you're not seeing zinc stearate. Okay.
There's a mamish guy who saw the one time you saw his thing and then he decided he's gonna base his stock on that.
WhatsApp wasn't around back then.
Yes. So yes, that person.
Maybe you should investigate it. Yeah, that's true.
You want to make it to me, don't investigate.
Okay. And the last thing to know back to Hilchos Taruvos is that more than one Kashrus rabbi has tasted zinc stearate. Okay, and I didn't. They offered me to try it. I haven't gotten to it yet. They offered me to try it, and they tasted it, and they said it's an example of the din we spoke about a few times ago of something that's an ain boy tam klal. Okay, it's completely ain boy tam klal, and therefore then it can't affect other things. Okay,
How are they allowed to taste
it's a kosher ones. They took kosher zinc stearate. They're kosher zinc stearate. The company Dafka uses strafe one. Okay,
From a shafted animal.
no zinc stearate. You can make from vegetable oil.
It's
No,
stearic
but
acid.
it's not the same. Just with that, maybe the animal ones have time.
Right, so it could be. It's possible. I mean, the company's telling us like the animal one works and the vegetable one doesn't work.
So
Okay,
give it a go to taste.
okay.
What is that? For what?
No, there's
I'm
some
saying,
kind
if you can't, you want to know if it has taste or not, you can't use the vegetable if it's the animal one.
well, really, so from a scientific perspective, they're exactly the same.
That doesn't make sense why one works and one doesn't.
Right, I'm saying, so you're saying the fact that the company says one works, they think that the reason why one works is because it has a little of, I forgot what other thing they think might be, like traces of something else mixed into it. You're saying maybe that gives time to it. Okay, maybe. Okay, whatever.
Maybe it's similar to glycerin. Like if you give it to a laboratory, they can't even determine if it's animal or vegetable. Maybe stearic acid would be the same thing.
They can't. But the company says to you, I'm telling you, we tried the vegetable one and it doesn't work. So something's going on, right? There's some kind of a difference.
Properties are the same. So
Right.
there's no difference between animal and vegetable as
Did-
far as taste.
But the question on that's what everybody would think, except the company's telling you we're trying really hard to do this. We want to help the Jews and the Muslims. We want to help them have this thing. We tried it and it don't work. So something emphasis. Okay. Let me just do fruits and vegetables. We'll do it quickly because we're late here anyhow. And that's like this. A different kind of coating. We'll leave the other things for a different year. Okay, that is like this.
I just wanted to say one thing. I heard that many United States they kasher pots.
New pots.
New pots.
Okay.
But so you're saying there's no difference between the pots and the cups?
No. The pots have more going on with them than the cups.
More edible.
I don't think it's edible, but it's more going on over there than there is with the cups.
What's going on?
You'll listen to the recording. You'll listen to the recording. Okay. So when you have fruits and vegetables, there's a whole bunch of them, a list of apples and peppers and cucumber, peaches and tomatoes, maybe other ones. They put coatings onto them to make them keep moisture inside of them, and also makes them look shinier and pretty.
Right.
So the functional part of the coating, I mean, the thing that does the job that you want it to do, is a wax. And there's two waxes that in America, the two waxes that people use are carnauba wax and shellac, both of which we consider to be kosher. Shellac is its own child, but both of them are kosher. No problem. Those wouldn't be the etzem. That wouldn't be a problem. Problem is that those waxes are solid at room temperature, and so it's sort of hard to get onto your apple when it's solid. Like, how are you gonna get this solid wax to be stuck onto your apple? Okay, you want a little bit, but how are you gonna get it on to stick onto it? So what you got to do is you have to get it into water, and then mix it into water, spritz it onto your apple, and then it'll stick onto your apple. Okay, well, in order to do that, you need to do two things. To get it to put it into water and then spritz onto your apple, you need to do two things. The first is you add alcohol so that eventually when you want to evaporate the water out, leaving the wax behind, it'll evaporate easier. So you add alcohol that helps with the evaporation. That's one thing you have to do. And the second thing is that wax and water don't mix. So you need to add an emulsifier in order to make the wax mix with the water. Now the wax mixed with the water and the alcohol there to help with the evaporation. Now you could spritz it onto your apple or your cucumber or whatever it is. You heat it up. They put it into like a warm chamber. The water and the alcohol evaporate out, leaving the wax behind. And now your vegetable, your tomato, is coated with this wax that makes it look beautiful. Okay, and keeps it moist.
Who does it? not let's say Ted's doesn't.
No. Not
source.
the grower gives it to a guy, and that person who's shipping it out to the market, he's doing that to.
We have a company in Seattle that makes it.
Okay, so the alcohol part of it is the less serious Shiloh. Usually you use isopropyl alcohol. There are people who use ethyl alcohol. It's true. Which is a little of a Pesach issue. Yes, a little bit. It's usually kidneys in America. It's usually kidneys, which wouldn't be a problem. It could be chametz. It could be treif also. But the emulsifier is more sensitive because an emulsifier, not always, but derech klal will have fatty acids to it, fatty as part of it. It could also have chametz in it. And two other things that make the emulsifier more complicated is one is that it's a davar maimed. Okay, right? It's what makes the wax and water be able to mix together. Without them, they wouldn't mix together, which would be worthless.
But at the end of the day, you don't want the water there.
The water does not stay there.
Okay, so at the end of the mind is out.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about it because it's too late, but I don't agree with that. You can read the long footnote here about that. I don't agree with that. But we don't have time for that. But it's a good point, but I don't think it's correct. But the second is, it'll make you feel better. Robelsky actually said that, but I don't. I'll explain to you afterwards why I don't think it's correct. Right? Yeah, you're a good company. Okay. And the second is that the emulsifier is one of the things that does not evaporate off. Okay, that makes it more common. The alcohol is going to evaporate off. I know there might be left a little traces behind, but basically the water and the alcohol are disappearing, but the wax is staying behind, and the emulsifier has no place to go. It just stays put. You don't need it. It has no function anymore. What's functional is the wax. But the emulsifier is not leaving. The water and the alcohol are going to evaporate out. So that's what makes it of the things that we have to consider. The most serious concern is our emulsifier. First, because it's davar, and second is because it gets left behind. Okay, and other things, not all. There are other things. I'm not telling you all this plasticizers and other things, but there's similar issues to this thing. So we're going to focus on the emulsifier just because it's easy to pick on one thing. Okay, so the first thought is that. It's okay. Don't worry about the fact that that there might be treif ingredients in here, because if you think about it, how much wax is on your apple or on your tomato? It's a tiny bit. It's going to be bitul. Think about how much is there. It's so little that you could barely notice it. Okay, it's a barely there. So it's going to be bitul. That's so.
It's bad. It's
right.
Chazusa.
Is it chazusa? I don't know if it's chazusa. It makes it shiny. You think that counts as chazusa? I'm not sure if that counts as chazusa.
It's there.
But the reason that the other side is,
and if it is chazusa,
You
then
can
what?
scrape
it
it.
can't be bitul. So that give color. If it gives color, bitul. I'm not sure if that counts as giving color. But the problem is that it could be removed, and there's a whole movement of people out there who don't want to eat wax on their fruit, and they have the ideas of how to do it. And
Not Jewish.
No, just because their own personal reasons. They don't want to eat carnauba wax. They don't want to eat shellac. Like for example, this I wanted to try. I didn't have time. I watched someone do it on a video, but which is they say if you take the melting point of carnauba wax, shellac and carnauba wax are 167 degrees and 187 degrees. Okay, that's background. That's not what they said in the video. That's the background. Okay, so what they said is take your apple, dunk it into boiling water for 10 seconds. You don't want to cook your apple, just for 10 seconds. And I'm in translating over here, which is going to make the carnauba wax or the shellac soften and maybe even begin to melt, because their melting points are well below boiling water. Okay, so you take boiled pot of water, I wanted to do this, but I didn't have a chance yet. Dunk the apple in for 10 seconds. That basically melts a lot of it and loosens the rest of it, and then use a rough shmata and rub it for a bunch of times, and you'll see that the wax comes off. Okay, and if you watch the video, you'll see exactly that works. Okay, again, I didn't try it at home yet, but what I'm saying is,
Presuming the emulsifier comes with it.
yeah, it's mixed in, it's together with the wax. Okay, so it's hard. So it's harder to say that it should be mutter because it's bitul when you could just remove it. Okay, so to this, Rabelsky said no. He thought it was mutter, and he thought the reason why it was mutter is because a thing that he says over many times. He would say over many times from Rabbi Yaakov about toothpaste. Okay, in the day, it's not true anymore. But in the day, toothpaste was made primarily out of calcium carbonate, chalk, which is to say, the point of toothpaste is that it's something abrasive that scrapes off whatever you ate off your teeth. So calcium chalk is pretty good abrasive, right? Think about chewing chalk. So calcium carbonate, it was mainly calcium carbonate, and that's not edible. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamnetsky said that when you have something that's not edible, when the bulk of this thing is not edible, You don't and issa falls into it. You don't need bitter b'shishim. You need just bitter b'roiv. Okay, bitter b'shishim is for foods. This is not a food, so it doesn't need bitter b'shishim. It just needs bitter b'roiv, and therefore. And that's enough. You don't have to be about the b'shishim. That's why Rabbi Yaakov said you could, in his day, you could use toothpaste that has glycerin in it because there might be 20% glycerin, but it's 20, which is not about the b'shishim. No, they don't use calcium carbonate. They use hydrated silica in much smaller amounts. They use a different thing. It's also not edible, but it's not the roiv of the toothpaste. So
glycerin is not the roiv either. It's not the stuff.
No, everything else are food ingredients. So now we go back to needing bitul b'shishim. Yaakov's case was it was not a food item. The etzem, it was a piece of chalk. You take a chalk and put a little treif into it. Yaakov just needs to be bitul b'roiv, not bitul b'shishim. So he said. Here also this wax. He said by the time the water and the alcohol evaporate out, the wax is be'erach 75 to 85% wax on your fruit. So it's wax. The wax is not edible. So since I think that's not edible, so we just need bit the baroiv. And since we need just bit the baroiv, the fact that the last 10, 20% or whatever might have in it some emulsifier or other chazara that we talked about, that's okay, and you don't have to. It just has to be bought the baroiv, and that's good enough. Okay, now, especially because we have running out of time, there's a lot of questions about what I just said to you about that last part. But that's what people follow. I mean, lots of fruits and vegetables have it. Many fruits and vegetables have it. And lots of people who are samech are being samech on that.